Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I am your host, Samuel. In this podcast, I interview top medical sales reps and leading medical sales executives across the entire country. And it doesn't matter what medical sales industry, from medical device to pharmaceutical to genetic testing to diagnostic lab, you name it. You will learn how to either break into the industry, be a top 5% performer within your role in sales, or climb the corporate ladder. Welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. Hello and welcome to the Medical Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel, and today we have with us another special guest who goes by the name of Taylor Laneville. He is the story of what happens when you take NCAA hockey, organic chemistry, and spine medical sales. But I am not going to give it away. I know you're intrigued, so thank you, as always, for listening to the Medical Sales Podcast, and I really do hope you enjoy this interview. Hey, Taylor, how are we doing today?
Good, Samuel. How are you doing?
Fantastic. No complaints. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
So I'm Taylor Laneville. I'm a territory manager out in Washington. I'm in the spine and pelvic space. So I sell devices for surgery that involves everything in the sacropelvic region. So we do some pelvic trauma, we do some spinal deformity, and we do some primary SI joint fusions. And those are kind of the three spaces that we exist in. And it's a lot of fun. I love my job, and it's kind of what I focus on day to day.
Exactly. Let's talk about it. Spine. Tell us, what is the rigor of the job like? Like, take us to a day in the life. When are you getting up? Do you have command over your day? Are you kind of waking up and it's just whatever happens? Give us the whole story from the moment you wake up to the moment you set it down. What's happening?
Yeah, so on a typical day, when there's cases involved, usually I'm up early. I like to get up at least an hour before I got to be out of the house, kind of get your day going. And then you get to a case 30 to 45 minutes before. In those 30 to 45 minutes, that's when your day really kicks off. And granted, once I'm up, my phone's on and emails are coming in and texts and stuff, and I will get back to those. But those first 30 to 45 minutes at the hospital are super important because you're making sure that your x-ray techs are caught up, your equipment's up, your equipment's sterile. I like to be in the room when my tray's opened, so that way I can make sure that it's on the field, it's sterile, and I don't have anything to worry about when the surgeon walks in the room. The hospital likes to know the implants are there early. I always end up walking those in. And so those first 30 to 45 minutes are pretty regular on a day-to-day basis, but you're at the mercy of the hospital. So start times are usually 7 to 7:30. So I'm at the hospital 6:30-ish usually on a day-to-day basis. And then depending on the type of case I have, will define if I'm in the hospital all day long and using time in between cases or in the hallways to maybe catch other docs I want to talk to. And if it's a shorter day where it's a quick case and I have the afternoon, I'll go grab a bite to eat after my case, and then I'll go out in the field to make sales calls. Because the one thing I learned pretty quickly in the industry is staying disciplined and doing the disciplined things every day are what kind of lead to success. And so that's the typical day. And I'll usually get home about finishing time for most people's work days. If I get home a little early, I usually have to catch up on emails and everything else that I either passed up throughout the day or went off in a time that I couldn't look at my phone. So
got it. And would you say that, 2-3 weeks out, you know exactly where you are and where you're going to be? Or is it much more week by week? It just changes dramatically. What's happening?
I wish I could say that a week out, I knew where I was going to be. But I mean, you should probably know from the industry, it can be 2 days before a surgery schedule forgot to call, block time opens up, or when we're doing some of the pelvic trauma stuff, a case comes in, they go through 48 hours of observation, and boom, we're ready to go. So I like to plan my days on my next week on Friday afternoon, and with the caveat and a little star on my paper that this is the plan. And then there's also plan B, C, and D, and everything can shift at all times, right? So I think that's one thing you have to, if you're going to step into the industry, I think that's one thing you have to know and was an adjustment for me, is it changes all the time. And depending on what, sector you're in, depending if you're in device, if you're in orthopedics, if you're in, general surgery, whatever you happen to be in, you're all going to have those changes that happen all the time. It just depends on, where is your changes hospital? Is it lunch scheduling? What's going to change? But I think everyone can kind of share in the fact that everyone has a plan for the week, and usually the week somewhere along the line hits a hiccup or two.
Right. What would you say is your favorite thing about being in spine?
My favorite thing about being in spine is I think it's a great space to build really strong relationships. I really enjoy working with the spine and neurosurgeons and their teams, because what I've found out at the hospitals I work at is usually it's always the same scrub tech. It's It's usually the same circulator. The PAs are all extremely highly skilled. I mean, all PAs are, but the spine ones really take an interest in the surgical side of things, a lot of them, because they are in surgery for so long. And I think when you're seeing a familiar face all the time, you're building a relationship with that room. I really enjoy that about it. And there's a lot to learn and a lot of variance in the cases. So, every spinal deformity, you're doing different coronal and sagittal balances and trying to fix everything. So it's really fun to be in those cases and watch those surgeons put that puzzle back together. And then, when your part comes up, if you can be an asset in the room and bring some value, that's always really nice too. Sometimes a straightforward case and they know what they're doing. Well, they always know what they're doing, but a straightforward case where they don't need to ask you a question, but it's just nice to be in there, and it's really cool to watch them work and kind of problem solve throughout that entire procedure.
Absolutely. And talk to us a little bit about the competitive nature of your role. What does competition look like in your space?
My current company that I'm with, we have a lot of niche products that kind of put us in our own space. And so that's really good because a great product with a great company that produces good data, competition's easy to fight off. But I think in the spine space, there's a lot of competition, especially with the advancements in robotics and navigation and robotics going to the ASC now. You've got this big spread of companies that will come in with these super specialized products that fit with their robots. So once the robot's in there, you're competing on the outside. So a lot of the smaller companies, like one that I'm with, in comparison, that's where the competition is okay, is your device compatible? If it's not compatible, you as the rep are now responsible for figuring out how your instrumentation can be best utilized with the platform they're using. And that's a lot of fun. It's where you can build a lot of value and a lot of, I guess you can say, street cred with your surgeons. If you're like, hey, we can make this work if you want to use it. And then when it does, they look at you like, all right, this works. Let's keep doing this. So I think the competition is friendly because the guys who are at the big companies who are doing, the whole spine, posterior hardware, and the cages, they have such a strong relationship with those surgeons that they want to help you because they care about the patient. And that's one cool thing about the space too, is everybody cares about the patient. That's why we're all there. Yeah. So I think definitely competitive, but it's a friendly competition.
Fantastic. Okay. Speaking of competition, let's go back to some of your history, see how you got to where you are today. Okay. So, you were a NCAA hockey player. Talk to us about that life. Take us back to college. What was the outlook? What were you thinking you were going to be doing?
Yeah, so I went to school out in Worcester, Massachusetts. I had a ton of fun. I played hockey out there for 4 years. And originally I came in and I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was a business major. And I think a year and a half in, I was learning in this class and I was like, I can't listen to this guy anymore. So I went and changed my major to pre-med, walked down to the registrar that day. I was like, I'm out. I'm going somewhere else. So I left and I called back home and I was like, hey, I changed my major. They're like, you're a year and a half in. What do you mean you changed your major? I was like, I'm going pre-med. So I did that and I really focused at that point on the science of it all because I've always been analytical and driven that way. So I got into it. I did a lot of cancer research. And when I came out, my whole plan was to get a job in research for a year, go into medical school, go from there. And I think a lot of people who are pre-med have a plan like that. And what ended up happening was I moved back to the West Coast and ended up going into organic chemistry, which is a class that I think anyone with a science background, everyone hates it. It's the worst, right? It's the worst.
It's the worst one. So, you struggle to make that one fun, but you try. Yeah. You struggle.
So next thing I know, I'm in a science career and I ended up getting into a company that was small and kind of took over the organic extractions department where I had a team of 5 scientists and we were an emergency response lab. So there's been some big stuff going on with like the plane hijacking in Seattle a couple of years ago and stuff. So the emergency responses, we were able to do the cleanup projects for those and the analysis for what actually needed to be done. So it was a really cool job.
Yeah.
But after about 5 years, I was like, okay, I got no windows. I can't see outside and I'm in a lab for 10 hours a day. I need a change.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of got pointed into the direction of medical sales and started to move my way down that road.
So before we jump into your journey into medical sales, you got to share some stories. I mean, what was that job like? If you can share with us, what was one of the craziest things you experienced in that role?
So we had a client come in and so everything has a hold time in science, right? So after a certain date, it's no longer accepted by the EPA as a positive result or a viable thing for like court documents or anything. So the craziest thing I did there was, and this is why I knew that people talk about the long hours of medical device sales, and they are long. Sure. But one night, samples got there at 2 p.m. They all needed to be done and extracted by midnight, and they wanted the data the next day. Sure. Well, anyone that's done any analysis in organic chemistry, it takes 5-6 hours to get that analysis done. Plus the machine has to run everything everything else. So I started doing it at 2. I got everything on solvent by midnight. I slept from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. on the couch in the break room, got back up, went back to work, and we got all the data out to the client. And that was probably the craziest thing because it was like
Wow.
sludge from the Puget Sound too. So it was
Wow.
just gross. Because organic chemistry is not clean most of the time.
Mhm.
It's pretty, you got a lot of dirt, everything you're kind of sifting through, trying to make things happen. So that was probably the craziest. And then the train crash out in Seattle a few years back, it derailed. And that was crazy too, because that was, another 24-hour turnaround, hundreds and hundreds of jars of samples coming in, and they needed it for the investigation. So that was pretty crazy too. But that's kind of the most crazy. Everything was pretty run of the mill besides that, just
Got it.
churning and burning all day.
Got it. So how did it happen? Was it just a gradual, you know what, I got to leave this? Or did you say one day, you know what, I'm leaving right now and I'm going to explore something else? How did you stumble upon medical sales?
Well, one, my fiance kind of helped me show me that there was options in medical sales, which was great because she's my biggest supporter. So all the kudos to her for that. And then my stepdad has a golf tournament where he golfs with a bunch of people from in cardiology, renal, GI. They're all in different specialties, but they're all in
Right.
medical sales, a lot of them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was kind of another entry point or a
That's
viewpoint
cool.
after talking to some of those guys. And I
Yeah.
was like, wait, you're telling me that I can use my whole pre-med background and get back into medicine and do it in a different route? Okay, cool. Let's see how I can navigate this. That was kind of the starting point between those guys and then my fiance.
Got it. And how long ago was this?
This was in 2018, halfway through, almost 2019 is when I first started to look.
Got it.
So I ended up using my resources through my stepdad and getting, I think I told you this, getting an interview at one of the big companies, and
Yeah.
just didn't know how to interview, didn't know anything about the industry. They're probably like, my resume looked like a scientist, not like a salesperson.
Right.
And they were just like, listen, you got to have some sales experience for this kind of thing. So I had to go back to square one and figure out, okay, there's got to be a way to do this. But that was kind of my first entry point, was that mistake. And then from there, when you fall on your face first, it's easy to pick yourself back up and keep working, right?
So, wow. What was the ultimate first gig that you did get?
So ultimate first gig was surgical sales associate with Summit Surgical, distributor of Arthrex, and that was in foot and ankle. But the thing with Arthrex is because it's a great team atmosphere and really good training, you end up in sports med cases, rotator cuffs, hips. You kind of end up in everything, even though your specialty is focused on one thing, and everyone's expected to know about biologics too. So you really get the whole gamut of orthopedics kind of tossed at you through a fire hose, as
Got
they
it.
say.
And if you can go back and say how long it took you to kind of get to a space where you knew exactly what you were doing, how many months was it, or years? Be honest.
To be honest, the basic stuff, the hammer toes, the simple foot and ankle stuff, that came in a few months. But even once I left Summit Surgical, I was still learning the complex foot cases, how to really define fractures and x-rays, what to look for, gaining some of the concepts and stuff like that in foot and ankle, that how these surgeons work and operate and their thought process. And I think anyone coming into the industry should be aware that whether it's day 1 or day 800, you're still going to be learning, because it's so important, because medicine's evolving, new surgeons are coming through, everybody's learning all the time. So that's one thing about the industry that people need to kind of focus on when they come in. And that's why I think, you can kind of agree to this probably, that it's a great industry, but it's always not for everybody, right? Because you always have to be curious and learning the whole time.
Absolutely. So you know what we do here as an organization when it comes to helping professionals get positions. What's your take on what's available now, resources like ours that can help someone get one of these roles in 3 months? What's your take on that?
Well, one, I wish that I had a resource like that to get me a role in 3 months, because it took me about a year and a half of cold calling on LinkedIn and having conversations, like 20-minute phone calls over lunch, and just learning as much as I could about the industry, because people will help you.
Sure.
But you also have to reach out to enough people that you can get a few to get on the phone, because people are busy. And when you're not in the industry, you don't realize how busy people are.
Right.
And so I think this resource for people that are looking to get in, that maybe have already had some career stuff and they just need a push, or they just need a way to learn how to interview for these jobs and stuff like that. I think it's a great resource, and one that I wish I had probably when I was doing this, because I would have been in the industry a lot earlier than I finally got in. But I'm here now, so no complaints. But definitely a great resource for everyone coming in. So
awesome. Talk to us a little bit about, a lot of our listeners, they're wanting to get into any kind of medical sales. And some of them are in different medical sales like OBGYN or endoscopy, or maybe in pharmaceutical sales or some kind of diagnostic testing sales. And they've maybe thought about, I would like to be a spine rep one day, or I wonder what that life is like. Talk to us a little bit about, in your top 3 things that someone should consider, like kind of check themselves about before they try to get into spine.
So a few things. One, how's your attention to detail? Because even the most basic tray and spine, there's a lot of instruments. Foot and ankle was the same way. So that was a nice transition. So attention to detail is huge in spine. What's your endurance like? That's a great way to say that. Because a lot of these spine surgeries and these cases that are big cases where you're going T10 to pelvis, big scoliosis cases, it's an endurance for the surgeon, it's endurance for the staff, and it's endurance for the reps. And you'll get to the hospital at 6:30 a.m. and you might not leave until 4 p.m. and you're in the OR the whole time. You might step out for some water, you might grab a coffee, you might have a bar in your bag, but it really is a lot of endurance. I mean, and like these surgeons, a lot of them, like they won't even leave to go to the bathroom, right? And so it's something about when you're in the OR and everyone's on the same mission that it's an endurance race. So it's just a long, long marathon. So I think that's something to be super aware of. Is it is challenging there. And then, after that, you usually have to run trays, you have to stay after to clean up all your stuff. So just the attention to detail, the amount of endurance, and then can you process all the information? Because it's so much coming at you all the time, and so much to know, like, especially when you get to the level of being a spinal consultant where that you're going over pre-op CTs, you're helping plan the cases, you're talking to the surgeon. Then you just start throwing in robotics and navigation, all this other stuff, and it just gets super hectic. So, do you want to keep learning all the time? Do you want to have these long marathon cases? And how's your attention to detail? If you can check all those boxes, it is a wonderful space to be in. It's a great space to be in. It's amazing.
That was so succinctly said. Thank you for that. And then on the flip side of that, what are some, besides just saying the opposite of the things you said, what are some, I guess, I don't know, maybe red flags that you need to be mindful of if you're stepping into spine?
Yeah, I mean, opposite of that. Yeah. And I think just one thing is if you're with a company where you're going to be trying to build business and there's not established business there, it's a very difficult space. Spine guys are really busy. Their OR times are long. They don't have a ton of free time. And a lot of times the relationships they have with their reps until their vacancy opens up are so strong that you have to come in with a totally different product or a different way to get in. And it's totally possible. People do it all the time, but it's a very challenging space. So it's very difficult to be in and to get a leg in a lot of these doors. It can take up to 2 years just to get the first case or even a meeting with some of these guys because they're busy and they've been using what they've used for a long time. And those companies are constantly coming out with new stuff to try. So why do they want to try yours?
Right.
So I think that's one of the most challenging red flag things about it and something to be very wary of. If you can't take a no and if you can't overcome the brick wall in front of you sometimes, because that's how it feels, then that's something to be really wary of.
Got it. If you can share, what is the biggest innovation in spine that you're most excited about?
Biggest innovation in spine that I'm most excited about. It's really cool to see where this endoscopic thing is going. The sports med guys, they're scoping the hip. I know Arthrex has the nanoscope. They're scoping the first TMT joint of the foot now. They're scoping the ankle joint. They're doing debridements and stuff. And this RIWO spine and Joymax are taking this endoscopic ball and just full speed ahead going with it. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the space develops around that and how minimally invasive things can truly get. If you haven't listened to, there's a surgeon out in Idaho, Dr. Roland Kent. He's got a podcast, talks about robotic spine surgery, and he really eloquently talks about what minimally invasive means in spine surgery. Sure. And how it means it's more minimally invasive than not, right? It's right. Instead of your whole spine being open on the table, you're only going through a little bit of layers. He really explains it well. And so I think this endoscopic space is going to be really interesting to see, how viable the corrections that they're getting, the fusions, the success rates, and then also the patient outcomes when you're just poking holes in the fascia versus making these longer incisions. So I think that's probably the most exciting innovation coming through spine and something to be for everyone wanting to get into these to be very aware of.
That is awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to switch gears just a little bit. So talk to us about the social side of life as a spine sales rep. Is your lifestyle kind of dominated by all your friends are spine surgeons and your workout buddies are spine surgeons and you're just pretty much a spine surgeon without the title? Or does it look a lot different and you have your own separate social life?
No, I definitely have my own separate social life. And I'm not going to sit here and tell everybody that the work-life balance in any medical sales is great, especially device sales. But, I do have my own group of friends. We hang out, we go to concerts, we're Mariners games, the Kraken are in town. So I'm out from Seattle. So we do all that stuff together. But I also do hang out with my customers, like my spine surgeons and other reps and stuff like that. And then, depending on the company you're at, it's always like a team event. So everyone's like really tight knit. So you create good friendships and relationships through that as well. So I don't think it takes over your life fully. And I don't think that there's anyone that I've talked to that doesn't have their own other friends. But I think what happens is these relationships you build in the OR with some of these surgeons, they just become your friend outside, and it's totally separate from work. So I don't think you don't end up just only hanging out with medical people or anything like that. At least not my experience yet. I'm sure maybe
Sure.
some people have gone down that road, but I try to keep all my friends there. And then I still have, all my hockey friends from growing up too. So kind of hold on to everybody if I can.
Fantastic. And tell us this, what's your life philosophy? What gives you the motivation to get up every day and give this career your all and just go all out? What's your driving force?
Well, the driving force, and I think everybody who goes into the industry to have that, is you are doing something to help people. And if you're concerned about patient outcomes and you do look at it that way, that what you're doing is helping your mom or your grandma one day, I think that's a really good driving force and can help you like really push yourself on the days that are hard. And then the other thing is just the ability to stay disciplined. I think that helps with all that. But I think having a goal and a why, as we say, but I think the overarching why of medical sales is that you're helping people, no matter what specialty you're in, and I think that that's a great driving force and kind of a thing that I believe in is what if I'm doing something that helps, it's easy to get up and do it.
Awesome. Okay, one last question for you, and then we're gonna go to the lightning round of questions.
Okay.
So, I love what you said earlier. You touched upon how you have your casework, but then you have to go out there and make sales calls. I've seen in medical sales, and I'll say device sales specifically, a lot of professionals are challenged in how to get that right balance of caseload versus getting new business. You're relatively, I wouldn't say you're a senior in this space. So you're kind of like in the middle of it, right? You just kind of gotten your place to a lack of a better phrase, peak performance, and you're kind of newly operating in that level. What would you say, what has helped you create that balance? Or would you even call it a balance? Would you call it something else versus getting that new business and then of course covering all your cases?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And to find the balance between generating new business and covering cases, I don't want to sit there and say that it's actually a balance, because in order to do both, you're putting in a lot of hours. But I think one thing that's important for anybody to know is when you get hired at a company, there's always A players. They're always on stage. The repeat offenders, they're there all the time. It's never different people. It always seems to be the same, right? Because they do the same things all the time that make them successful. And so what I did, especially when I came over to my current company, is I called all of the A players, a lot of them from around the country, and I was lucky enough to have a few of them on my team, and asked them, what do you do day to day? Like, what kind of habits have you put in place? And if you have these conversations, you start to look at like, hey, you know what? With my personality, this will be super successful. This part might not be something that I want to do all the time. So I'm not going to try that out yet. Let's try this. And you can kind of build your own set of tools and skills and habits to create something that, okay, this is how I balance this. This is what I do on Fridays, and kind of design your whole week based on a combination of what everybody else does to create your own pathway to success. And I think that that's how you find the balance with those things. And then just making use of the time you're allowed to be in the OR, because if you have a reason to be at the hospital, it's a great time to try and catch some new business, a surgeon you want to talk to, maybe a PA. If your company, educates PAs and APPs, it's always a good time in that OR because you have a reason to be in the hospital. So those are the two things to do.
Masterfully answered. Thank you for that. All right. Now we're going to have our lightning round, and you have less than 10 seconds. Are you ready, Taylor?
Yeah, I'm ready.
There is no balance to these answers. No, I'm joking. Okay. All right. So first question, what is the best book you've read in the last 6 months?
Oh, I'm reading, it was actually The Choice by Edith Eger. It's great. Super good. She is a psychologist who survived the Holocaust, and she tells her story for the first time and also talks about her patients, and it's really incredible. It's a really good book.
Wow, The Choice. Is it a deeper understanding of what it means to make the right choice, or to make a choice for yourself, or something else entirely?
It's a deeper understanding of how to make the choices and choose to be happy in the choices that we make in life. And it is a really, really, really good book. I can't recommend it enough.
Wow. Okay.
Especially if I like a little bit of history too. So it dives in some history and some personal experiences. And I highly recommend it.
The Choice by who again?
Edith Eger.
Edith Eger. Okay, we'll have to check that out. Excellent.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the best movie or TV show you've seen in the last 6 months?
I'm watching Grey's Anatomy for the first time. After being in the industry for 3 years, I'm finally doing it. I finally put my hands up, my white flag, and said, let's go.
Are you hooked?
I'm on season 3 in like a month. I'm so in it. I'm attached to all the characters. Izzy, George, Meredith. I'm just all in it.
Oh man.
I don't like Dr. Shepard. Yeah, I'm sold. Yeah, I'm all in.
For being a medical sales rep and getting hooked on this show this late, that is classic.
Yeah.
glad we
Yeah.
have that captured.
Yeah, I held off as long as I could, and finally my fiance got me onto it. She's like, "You got to watch it," and I was like,
Now you
"Oh,
get
it was all over. It was done. It was easy." So,
That is awesome. All right.
yeah.
Best meal you've had in the last 6 months.
Best meal. I went to Bateau in Seattle. It is a place where they butcher a whole cow every like night, and then
Okay.
they sell out of all the cuts. And when you go in, you can describe the type of steak you like to eat, and they'll give you like cuts from different parts of the cow that kind of are like, instead of a ribeye, they have like 3 cuts that are similar,
Oh,
and they'll
wow.
walk you down it, and you can get like little 2-ounce portions. It was really good. It was awesome.
So they prepare it and you make it there, not just giving you meat.
Oh no, they prepare it there. It's and everything is from the, like, they think they do 2 or 3 cows a day or something, and then they also dry age everything there. And they have this giant meat room that you can check
What?
out. It's cool. It
What's
was
the
good.
name?
I don't eat Bateau in Seattle,
Bateau.
and I believe after I win, it got nominated as like one of the best places to get steak in the world.
Wow.
But you can fact check me on that because I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's what I heard.
No, that's going on the list. All right. And then last but not least, what's the best experience you've had in the last 6 months?
Best experience I've had in the last 6 months. That's a tougher one because I haven't traveled in the last 6 months really. But actually, honestly, I took a mini vacation down to Portland last weekend to see my grandma with my fiance, and that was the first time. It was super relaxing, and that was a great experience. We walked around Portland and went to coffee shops and breweries and had a great time. So that's probably the best experience I've had in the last 6 months. That was great. Yeah, it's good to spend time away from the computer, away from the cell phone for a little bit. It was nice.
Absolutely. Well, Taylor, it was fantastic having you on the show today. Thank you for spending time with us and sharing us all the knowledge that you can get from spine and why we should or should not entertain that type of space. And we look forward to seeing amazing things coming from you as you continue your career.
All right. Thanks for having me, Samuel, and best of luck with everything this year. And I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. And that was Taylor Laneville. What a wealth of information. I really love talking to Taylor because he really went in on what to consider if you're someone that wants to get into spine medical device sales. You might have listened to this episode, and maybe you're someone that actually does want to get into spine medical device sales, and you got some pearls today. But your traction or your pursuit, what you've been trying to do as far as get into the space, you've been falling short. And you're really at a place where you're asking yourself, what else can I do? Well, I'm here to share with you that you need to take yourself to evolveyoursuccess.com and follow the prompts, fill out our application, get in touch with one of our account executives, and let them talk to you about how the Medical Sales Career Builder program can change your life. And if you're someone that just wants to get into medical sales, maybe you're not sure where you want to be. Maybe you've thought about spine, but you're also interested in pharmaceutical sales, but you've heard about the oncology and diagnostic sales, and you're asking yourself, where do I belong? Where do I fit? Where would I find happiness? Where can I take the current skills I have and make them work for me? Again, visit evolveyoursuccess.com, fill out our application, and have a discussion with one of our account executives, and let's see if this program is the right program for you to get you exactly where you want to be. And for those of you that love the podcast, your listeners, you love to listen to this. You come back every single week. I do this literally for you. Please visit our page, go to our podcast page, or go to Apple iTunes or go to Spotify and write a review. Write a review about what you're learning. Write a review about how much you love the podcast, if it's true. And of course, be sure to give us 5 stars. As always, we do our best to bring you guests that are doing things differently in the medical sales space. And make sure you tune in next week for another episode of the Medical Sales Podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And remember, I have a couple programs that show you exactly how to break into the medical sales industry, become a top-performing medical sales professional, and also how to masterfully navigate your career to executive level leadership. Check out these programs and learn more at evolveyoursuccess.com. Stay tuned for more awesome content with amazing interviews.